Tai sveiki visi, toliau tęsiam neredaguotą pokalbius ir šiandien turėsim progos pasikalbėti su Rusijos opozicijos atstovu. Pats atstovas papasakos mums, kuo užsiima, manau bus taip paprasčiau, taip aišku pereisim į anglų kalbą, o po to įdėsim subtitrus ir visą kitą. So Ilya, I told our viewers that we have a pleasure to have a Russian opposition person.
Thanks for inviting me. Yes.
Well, thanks for coming on such a short notice and communication. Like it's a pleasure. So as we talked before the show, it's quite complicated. You did many things in your life. So like, who are you? How you came to this position? Who are you now? And maybe just a short intro about yourself before we start about the democracy, Putinism, and everything else.
You said a short intro about myself. We it's all about time.
It's the whole episode. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the short.
I am chairing Congress of People's Deputies, which is a shadow Russian parliament, which was established to actually redesign Russia, reset Russia. Right now, approximately 100 deputies which are participating there. But most of my time is dedicated to helping armed resistance to grow. I'm working with Legion Freedom of Russia here in Ukraine. I'm working with different resistance groups in the front line back in Russia. That's my primary focus.
So I understand that the current Russian government is not very in favor of you.
They're my big fans. You're big
fans.
I have a special place in their hearts. Yes.
I remember that there was one question about because there's like a few different military organizations. The Russian voluntary. In Ukraine, and the question was why there is like a few, why not one, because it's still not a huge contingent. Why these partitions?
Oh, because people are human. And they like to compete with each other. They like to have their piece of glory for themselves. They all know that they think that they know how it's better to do things. And they have their own way of doing it. And my position is that let the 100 flowers bloom, and let them grow and let them flourish. And just important that people are doing something. Like if we are to talk about the particular differences in these volunteer groups. So right now, like 3 major units of Russians in Ukraine. And they are not that small, by the way. I would say that 2 largest international groups in Ukrainian army, they're both Russian.
And what size are we talking about here? Because it's probably hard to understand what is big,
I cannot say numbers because it's against the law in Ukraine to give numbers. But just to give you an idea, Legion Freedom of Russia is 4 battalions. And then you can do the math by multiplying how much is this. Legion is pretty politically agnostic group, which was compiled by people who were never before part of the military exercise. They were created from the scratch after February 2022 out of people who switched sides to the side of good from the Russian army, who crossed the front lines, some political activists who were coming to join, and there were also Russians living in Ukraine, married with Ukrainian women or working here, and they wanted to volunteer to fight for Ukraine, but they were not allowed into Ukrainian army because they don't have Ukrainian passports. So this like 3 constituency which compiled the Legion. That's why it's large and it's very politically agnostic. It's very broad. But then, say, Siberian battalion. It started as a battalion of people from Siberian regions who want to get separate from Russia. It's a small unit, but nevertheless, they have their own focus, their own objective. That's why they don't want to be with just a broad Russian group. They want to be among the people who are their common thinkers. And then they were augmented with the people who are anti-authoritarian left. So it's anarchists, black bloc type people, they're internationalists, and that's why they were very comfortable to join these Siberian people, now, although that they themselves are not from Siberia at all. And Russian Volunteer Corps, another group, is the group which is very politically homogenic. It's right-wing people. Most of them were fighting here in Ukraine back from 2014. They have a lot of experience here. Many of them were affiliated with Azov. But again, that's a question that people have Russian passports. And that's why they created their own group. They didn't want to get diluted with anybody else. They said, we are the best fighters. Valhalla awaits us, and we go forward. So that's their decision.
So probably one of the interesting question is how well connected is the Russian opposition, which is like based in Vilnius, in Warsaw, other places with this military, people who are fighting in Ukraine. Do they have like the same? I mean, I understand it's very diverse, but like the views, the objectives, the goals. Do you have some, I don't know, do they have some spokesman? Like, of course, in military, politics is probably forbidden, but as I understand, this is, legion specific, volunteers from Russia. What is the connection between the opposition and these people who are fighting alongside the Ukrainian army against the aggressor?
Well, originally, it was just myself who was involved in supporting this military side to grow. I was part of the group which originally conceived the idea that there has to be military groups fighting, because even for Ukrainians from the very beginning it was a very alien idea, and they were saying, how come, a citizen of the aggressor country would be, fighting together with us? It's like weird. But then they came to the idea that it was the right thing to do. But in August 2022, we signed an agreement to form so-called political center in Kyiv, which would work as a bridge between the military side and media and international politicians, promoting this idea of Russian volunteer movement, this armed resistance, etc. And I was appointed as the coordinator of that center. That's how it started. Originally, it was a lot of pushback from our friends in other countries, Russian oppositionists, say in Vilnius, Garry Kasparov's forum. For 1 year, I being one of co-founders of that forum, I was banned from coming from forum because I am with the armed resistance. But then they realized that it's the right thing to do. And right now, Kasparov's forum is our strategic ally and very good friends. They are speaking everywhere that it needs to be supported. Last year in Vilnius, there was an auction to support Russian volunteer groups in the front lines, fundraiser event. Not everybody in the Russian opposition support this. Other people who are sitting in Vilnius that are allied with Alexei Navalny, they say that we're all crooks, that we just fronts for Ukraine's military intelligence, because no Russians would ever be allowed to come to Ukraine. They don't believe in this. No, what can I say? It's a lie, and I think it's just because of the political competition, because they understand that the future is here, but they don't want to let it go without themselves, and they don't know how to get control for that. There are other people who are right now kind of like sitting on the fence, like Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He many times said that, yes, he understands that the war would not end without removing Putin from power, and that Putin would never be removed from power without the armed component. But at the same time, he says that at this very moment, it's too small and it's too irrelevant, and that's why he himself should focus more on a non-violent wide civic movement. And if he would split his attention between the two, it would hurt both, and that's why he would better focus on a non-violent thing. Which is his choice. I totally respect this. I always very sorry for the people only who trying to kind of split us. And unfortunately, one of most visible people like this is in Lithuania is Andrius Kubilius, who was a long time my friend. Right now he's saying, okay, we should support these non-violent people, Navalny, Khodorkovsky, and everything, and we shouldn't touch those who are fighting in the front lines. And for me, it's a mistake, because my ideal configuration of the Russian opposition is when there is a big, large round table, where there are people who are for non-violent things, there are people who are for journalist investigations, there are people who are humanitarian volunteers in the front, and there are people who are with partisans and resistance fighters. And we're all working together, we decide who is responsible for what, and we help each other. And that's how it should be, and then we come to power together. That's how we can achieve things.
Well, regarding Andrius Kubilius, it will be a long rant from me, so I avoid this to save your time. But I have to let you know that his position is probably most definitely not the only one we have, and I would say that his voice is not even the loudest at the moment. So,
no, as I mentioned him for just one reason, because he is the chief rapporteur in the European Parliament. And we see the difference when, say, Emanuelis Zingeris, also from Lithuania, working in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. And he is very supportive. He is pushing pro-Ukrainian agenda, and he is supporting what we do in the home front. When there was recent attacks on refineries, there was even a statement by Parliamentary Assembly, which was initiated by Zingeris, the right thing to do. European Parliament is taking way more cautious position, and obviously it's very much in the hands of a person who is coordinating this particular topic.
Well, we'll soon have a new European Parliament, so I guess there'll be some changes, you know. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. 1 week to wait, you know, and we see what's happening. So basically, you know, in Baltic states, I think, in Poland, in Lithuania, we always, when we talk about Russia, and somebody says, you know, the future of Russia is democratic, we always are a bit skeptic, because obviously there is no historical precedent. Well, someone might mention, you know, Yeltsin, but we all know that during his term, some strange wars started as well. So how do you think this possibility of Russia of transitioning from, you know, this the mentality of Russia, you know, it's sort of imperialistic in our view from the Baltic states. Maybe you see differently. You can express your position, but how is it possible to transition from what is like for the last, I don't know, 200-300 years to this democratic approach of governing, self-governing?
Well, look, I witnessed many times, even in the duration of my life, ups and downs. I see that all foreign policy issues, for Russians, they are not that relevant, actually. And they're always being sacrificed for internal things. That's kind of typical for many large nations, large territories. It's the same like in the United States, for example.
Well, it's very hard to compare Russian Empire with, you know, or Soviet Union with the United States of America. But I'm trying to get your point.
No, actually, I think that to many points we are very similar. Because Russians do not exist as a nation, as an ethnicity. It's a political nation. It's a melting pot, like Americans. And I think it's just like two examples in the world in general of these nations. And both are driven by a certain mission. And this mission is also very similar in the United States and in Russia. Just the oppressive nature of the Russian state always redirects this passion in a totally different direction. And Russian civilization, Russian culture always kind of hangs in the air because it cannot exist without, for example, Ukraine. One of the reasons of this war is that because the cradle of the civilization is in Kiev, not in Moscow. Moscow is not even secondary; it's tertiary after Vladimir Suzdal, Rus. So that's why for Russians is always very complicated and it's the question of how the system is being built. We saw what was the passion to actually get to freedom and to break the prison of nations in 1991. I remember how my personal political career has started. You know, 1 million people on Manezhny Square in support to Lithuania in particular. And I was personally disbanding a Komsomol organization in Moscow out of protest of what happened in Vilnius in that year. So it was a very genuine desire to do this. And then Russians several times voted in favor of Yeltsin when it was referendums and everything. But then they started to understand that all this democracy and freedom is just poverty, corruption. It's not the well-being. It's the other way around. It's oligarchy. You know, it's crooks who are coming to power out of selfish needs and greed and everything. And then I said, okay, then why do we need this? And that was something that for Putin was very easy to play on, and we are back to the same old track. And that's why we started this Congress of People's Deputies, because I personally, with all due respect to my comrades and colleagues in the Russian opposition, I am with 100% certainty convinced that if we are not prepared for the transition in advance, if we did not draft the new legislation, the new constitution and whatever, with 100% certainty there would be again crooks which would be drafting it in their own favor, and using that will everybody be short of time, you know, faster, and we will be back in the same track. That's why I think that we need to redesign the state from the very beginning, agree this to all the nations that are inside the territory of modern Russia, because some of them will decide to go, and we need to respect this. Some would decide to stay, but if they would stay, they would have certain conditions under which they are staying, so we need to agree on this. And obviously we need to agree this with representatives of Russian people.
So, as I understand, you are well aware that because there is some opposition in Russia who is not, when you mention some kind of dismantling or, you know, some current territories getting freedom, they're a bit allergic to this.
Yes.
In how I understand your approach, you understand that it should be a choice for, I don't know, Buratia or whatever, you know, to choose how they go, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So my approach is that I think that both approaches are imperialist, because we have people in Russian opposition who are, say, just united Russia, not even mentioning that they are repeating the name of Putin's party, Единая и неделимая Россия. So that's imperialistic, but the other extreme is also imperialistic when people are saying, oh, we just need to disband Russia. And there are people like this. They are in minority, but they do exist. But it's also imperialistic, because we need to ask people what they want. And some people, for example, Chechens, I am pretty certain that they would decide to go their own way. But there could be other nations which would not want to do the same thing. So we need to provide them with the possibility to make their choice. And some of these representatives of nation, they criticize me saying, you probably want to do just another referendum, but there is majority of Russians on our territory, so they would vote in your favor. No, I'm saying it's your decision how to do it. But just it has to be an established will of people who are on that territory. And in our new constitution, we even making a provision that in future, even those nations who decided to stay, that in future they can still organize a referendum and become separate if they would want to. But at the very beginning, we need to make an agreement with all the territories who want to join the federation, who don't want to join the federation. Because if they are joining, they are signing under this constitution, and it's their conscious choice, but it needs to be the choice of the people.
Okay, so here is, of course, the question about, you know, civic society, the maturity of civic society. Well, we all understand that for the last 20 or so years, even more, there is like a lot of state propaganda which is from Kremlin. How do you think what is the condition of the society in Russia at the moment? Can they actually like contemplate some of the values that you are, let's say, in your forums and the opposition are talking about? Is that not too complicated for the people who have been like cut off, from some media sources? Of course, the younger people probably they have the ability to use the internet, but it's a bit strange when you sometimes listen to people, streaming and calling different places in Russia and talking with young people. What is their approach? Like, obviously, the propaganda is working. So, how do you think that that has affected the current state of this civic society?
No, look. Firstly, there is no civic society because there are no citizens.
I was trying to be polite.
No, there are no citizens. Citizenship is a complex thing that needs to grow. Unfortunately, there is none right now. There is a very atomized, amorphic. I wouldn't use the word society. It's a mass of people who know just one thing, that nothing depends on them, and they want to stay as far as possible from the state. When we were, by the way, talking about Americans, to some degree it's also true, because it's the same. Americans also want to be as far as possible from their state. They're very individualistic, and many
but we have to remember that they have like a lot of freedom on the state level, so there are a lot of decisions which the national government is not affecting.
That's exactly my point. And that's something that we need to create. We need to create a similar system. And we at Congress of People Deputies, we believe that actually American approaches are way better fit for the Russians than continental Europe. We usually was copying French or German practices, which are very rigid, and they don't go well with Russians. They always start, to find ways how to get around them in the courts and everything. I think that we have to allow way more creativity and for people to be way more individualistic. I think that the biggest myth about Russians is that it is a very collective nation. Germans or French, they are collective nations. They go to the large protests, labor unions and everything, where you saw something like this in Russia. No, in Russia it's very atomized society. So you just need to propose them a very limited but very clear set of rules, which would be then perfectly followed without any exceptions. And that's our objective, what we want to achieve. I've been many years a member of State Duma from Novosibirsk, which is Siberia, and my district was split half and half between urban and rural population, and I was always collecting more votes in the rural part than in the urban part. Ironically, because I'm a very urban person, but and young and whatever. Just because I was talking to people, that's why I believe in my people. I know that they can make rational choices, but when they are properly asked, when they understand that their choice matters, that it has an impact, that it's a responsible thing. Because when they understand that they're just being manipulated and so just some another political crook wants to play with what they are to say, they will just say like what is expected from them. Because it's centuries of oppression, Tsar times, communist times, Putin's times, it's always oppression. And they know that you better say what they expect you to say, what they want to hear, just to keep your family safe and your job and your money and intact, so that nobody is touching them.
You mentioned one thing that I want to a bit return to. You mentioned that the Russian culture does not see itself without parts of Ukrainian culture. Belarus is probably the third part in this approach. Like, how do you, people from opposition, see it? Because obviously a majority of Ukrainians they see it a bit differently. They don't want to belong to some kind of triangle which is like dominated by the the Russia, and what is this approach like? what is the approach to the Ruski mir philosophy? Like we all know that the Dugin nonsenses. Like, what is your take on this?
Oh, well, I know Dugin very well personally. He is just a patented fascist, so that's quite clear. And I think that Russia has lost all the moral right to pretend to be like a sort of a leader in like whatever geopolitical alliances for a certain extended period of time. My personal view is obviously that Russia should become part of the European Union and NATO. At the end of the day, that we are the part of the Western civilization. I do believe in the more broader Northern Alliance, where it would be a global competition between, but civilized competition between global North and the global South. That all nations that have their roots in the Renaissance, in the Christianity, in the, in Abrahamic religions, that they need to be together because it's the same ethical platform where all these people share.
For a lot of people, it might sound very, strange because at the current situation, like Russia is more connected with the Asian, states, and obviously there is like different, theories where they come from. So how do you see this? Because we have Russia on the other side of Ural, and it's more Asian Russia. How to blend this whole thing?
Well, look, on the next interview, we should invite somebody from China and then put a mirror in front of us, and we'll look at the mirror and we'll see whether we belong to one civilization or for different civilizations. Yes. So I have a lot of respect for Asian people. I spend a lot of my own time in Asia, especially in South Korea, in Taiwan, by the way, in Singapore, in Malaysia. But, there's a different, this ethical foundation. It's just simply different. It's not that somebody is better or worse. It's just different. And obviously we are way closer to each other than with those Asian people. We need to have good and friendly relations with them. But if we are talking about creating a common governance structures, common cultural things, common marriages, whatever, it's still, it's us which.
I'm gonna joke now. The Chinese men, they don't have problem when they go to the other side. What do you think?
It's such a huge disproportion there. Yes, it's actually quite threatening. Mm-hmm. But I would say that Russian people in Siberia, they don't like to be blended with Chinese. Yes, in Eastern Siberia right now, disproportion between men and women. Right now, it's like two female to one male in the fertile age, which is like quite stunning. When you come there, you see, a lot of ladies who have no pairs, and that creates an opportunity for this like infiltration and mingling together and everything. But it's not something which is desired by Russians. They would way better integrate with the West rather than with the East. It's Putin's perversion which is pushing them in that direction, and for many Siberians it's being seen as a large threat. It's not an opportunity. It's a threat, and it's a demographic threat, it's a cultural threat, it's a business threat, and at the end of the day, it's even territorial threat. Although I think that personally, territorial threats are over-exaggerated, but still, for many, it's like this. So I think that when we'll get rid of Putin and Putinism as a political system, we will get to normal. Obviously, it would take time. It's a matter of trust. It's a matter of working together in parallel for a certain period of time. I think here a lot would depend on Ukraine. I think that the obvious leader for this post-Soviet Slavic space is Ukraine, because that's where was the cradle, again, of Christianity for Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. That's where was the moral leadership, and that's where the victory would be with. And that's why I think that Ukrainians would have this opportunity. Whether they would use it or not, I don't know, because I think it would be a certain competition between the intra-sea project that would be promoted by the Poles and something that could be promoted by Ukrainians. We anyway would be all very close, but what would be the particular content of this union, whether it would be Nova Lubelska Unia, which again be promoted by Poles with Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and Lithuania. Whether it would be some different format, I don't know. But there would definitely be something.
So, regarding the Putin and Putinism, how do you think it's possible to make an end to this? Like, does there have to be, I don't know, some kind of assassination of the current, dictator, or like, how is it possible? And the big question is, if he's gone, does this Putinism still, have legs, or and how long it can last? Like, what is your approach? Because when we see statistics about, what the Russian people think about Putin, and of course you can say a country, in Russia, is complicated statistics, but you probably have some, insights from your channels. How do the population, Putinism, and end to this all correlates?
Oh, well, I even wrote a book, Does Putin have to die? And the short answer is yes, he needs to die. And he will die, he is mortal. Whether he would be killed during a coup, or as a result of a military defeat, or he will just pass away for natural reasons, but he would be dead in a certain point of time for sure. My question is not how in particular he would pass away. My question is what would be next, because obviously there would be a competition within his inner circle, and
but because I'm asking this, that when is also important, because every day, every year he's still in power.
He kills people.
So it's really important to make this end as soon as possible.
That's 100%, and we are not sitting and waiting. We are very actively working on growing our military capacity in the field. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very important thing for a politician to say, we cannot influence this, so we should just wait. And unfortunately, many of my colleagues in the Russian opposition are saying exactly that, but I think it's obviously a mistake. Everybody should do to its maximum what he can do himself. We are doing this armed resistance at the field, and even more importantly, armed resistance in the home front, because these are people who are the closest to Putin personally. But there is also other things which we need to do, without which Putin's regime would not be dismantled. And that's, firstly, it's a political alternative to Putin, and that's Russian elites should see that, so that the consolidated West made a decision. So if not Putin, then, we have an alternative. Because otherwise it would be just within the same in the circle.
Just to clarify, because there are some opinions that, when Putin goes, there's going to be some kind of, a mafia war between the structures of power in Russia, and they are going to decide who is the next leader, not the opposition in the West. How do you think it's possible to actually get some, connection and, with this current Russian elites? And do they all have to go, or it's possible to somehow, get something working between the opposition that is in the West and people who are in Russia?
Thank you for this question. Mafia people are capable fighters with unarmed people, but they are not ready to fight with the military force.
But many of the oligarchs, they have some private armies or structures. So you think it's not important?
No. First of all, oligarchs, they don't have private armies. Putin is making sure that they don't, and they don't. So they have just their own personal security, but it's not a private army. You know, it's usually like 7 dozen people who are the personally bodyguards. It's irrelevant. You may say that there are armed people in Rosgvardia and in FSB and whatever, but all the examples, even the most recent example with Prigozhin, demonstrates to us when there is a serious threat, they just disappear. You know, they are nowhere to be seen. Kadyrov guys, they got stuck in traffic, you know, they couldn't get beyond traffic jams.
But there is an opinion that in terms of Prigozhin, he wasn't close enough to raise the alarm of you know, certain people in power, although Putin was somewhere in the bunker, but...
Come on, he was so close that nobody wanted to confront him. Everybody wanted to wait when that was be over.
But like if you talk to military people, they all say, look, there's the size of this Prigozhin convoy and the size of Moscow, and you know, like it's impossible to do anything anything serious with this kind of amount of you know, equipment and people. So
the only thing that I can say, you're mistaken.
Okay, so can you a bit clarify on what was going on like in these elites? Were they all flying away, you know, to the other countries?
No, yeah, they were all scared shitless because everybody knew that it was possible, including Putin. And it was for Putin's benefit that Prigozhin's mutiny was not directed against him, it was directed against Shoigu. And Putin summoned all his, you know, buddies like Dumin and like Lukashenko to give Prigozhin his personal guarantees, which he accepted.
But, you know, like in terms of Putin and the other guys like the Rosgvardia, I mean, you have like the advantage of people and all the, you know, the military equipment. So where was this shitless, you know, scare coming from? Because like obviously it was possible to dismantle this coup.
It's for you as a Western person, it looks like this. For me as a person who is from Russia, I was predicting what would happen and that he would face no resistance, and that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly what happened in the past.
So why he stopped? Because he probably knew himself that he can, as you say, he can come to Kremlin, take the seat, you know, and everything. Why he stopped? Like, what was the, like, because he probably understood that if he stops, well, he will end up like he ended up, you know, in one way or another. He did not. So he was a naive person, or like, what do you think?
He was loyal to Putin. I think that he was always loyal to Putin. He is one of the closest people to Putin. You just need to understand that the whole system of power in Russia is a mafia state, is a gang. And in the gang, in the mafia, you have certain roles which are being assigned to people, and they have been tested for decades in the past. Who was Prigozhin? Prigozhin was, in Russian, держатель малины. So he was the host of the cafe where the whole gang of Vladimir Putin was getting together and discussing the most sensitive things. It's a specially trusted, vetted person. And that's why Putin was giving him, the only person, only to him, the right to create the private army, because he knew that this guy would not betray him. And he did not. He was rebelling against Shoigu because he thought that Shoigu was not fighting well enough in Ukraine.
So in your opinion, why did he got killed then? Like if he was, he did not threaten, he was vetted, as you say, trusted. Why finish this guy? Just to show, like the public that that's how we deal with anyone who you know throws the glove on the on the ground.
Well, my theory is that he was killed by Shoigu. Because again, in the gang, that's a legit thing. You know, one person attacked another guy, that guy has the right to retaliate. But at the end of the day, Putin delivered on his promises. Everything that he promised to Prigozhin, he just recently accomplished with Shoigu. He put to jail all his key people and fired Shoigu. Gerasimov is next, by the way.
Well, we'll have a chance to see. So, returning back to this Russian opposition that is abroad, and these oligarchs and, you know, other elites, how to make contact with them, like with these two groups, and how to encourage them that after Putin, they should turn to you guys and to the constitution, to some kind of democratic instruments, because I am pretty sure that the tendency will be a bit different.
There is a certain short-term thing and a certain long-term thing. Long-term thing is what I already started to say, that we need this recognition. We need that Russian elites understand that there is a political alternative constructed, which would be next after Putin, and that the consolidated West, led by Ukraine or not led by Ukraine, hopefully led by Ukraine, would insist on this political configuration, that it is vetted, approved, and that's how it would be done. That's one thing. Then the second thing is short-term issue of sanctions. Because everybody wants to get out, and many Russians right now, they want to switch on the side of good. If they would see a clear roadmap how to do it. Even some of key Russian oligarchs, we discussed with them, they said, okay, so 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion, how much is needed to be given to Ukraine? We are ready to give this to Ukraine, to Ukrainian army, to criticize Putin, to say that he is a bastard, that we are against the war. Just tell us, because we don't want just to say it and then get killed. And then nothing happens because you are not getting us out. So you provide us with a roadmap how we're getting off the sanctions, and we do what is being requested from us to do. We're ready to do it. And so far, because of the political restrictions in the West, nobody wants to get any of those bastards out. And just don't take me wrong, I agree that they're bastards. They all contributed to the Putin's regime, and they all deserve to be punished for what they have done. But we need right now both money and this split inside Russia to achieve victory. And that's why we need to incentivize those who are ready to follow this path.
So logically, probably I need to ask, what is the relationship between the Russian opposition and the current regime in Ukraine? How is things getting together? Because we know that regarding some Belarusian opposition or Navalny people, Zelensky's cabinet is skeptical, and the parliament, of course, has some approach. How is it with you and the Ukrainian government, like the parliament and the president?
Ukrainian officials, many of them, consider Navalny to be as imperialistic as Putin, and I think it's a fair point. I don't think that they're hopeless, but unfortunately, so far they behaved exactly in this fashion. They take some others as those who are sitting on the fence and who want at the same time to be fucked and to preserve their virginity. And that's nobody likes, because in a situation of war, they want them to be black and white, or you're on one side or on another side. But those who are making this public choice, there is no problem. It's a very simple formula that the Russian opposition who is coming to Ukraine, going to the front lines, fundraising for Russian volunteer groups or Ukrainian military, is accepted, is a friend. Everybody is talking to him. He's not being ignored. And just recently we had a major event in Lviv. It's at the end of May, where such people got together and decided to create a more permanent coordination structure, which would be our war cabinet, to help coordinate political wing and the military wing.
Well, talking with you, it sounds not so complicated to get this project. Maybe we are more skeptical. I get the point that.
Obviously, I'm trying to inspire you to join me. Obviously, there are a lot of difficulties. Otherwise, we will be talking in Kremlin now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of alternatives. Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of Russian opposition, obviously there are territories which were taken by Russia. I'm talking about territories in Georgia, Crimea. How does the Russian opposition see these territories in the future? What is the status? What is their connection to the motherland countries that were taken from?
No, first of all, I kindly ask you to forget the word Russian opposition. There is no such thing as the Russian opposition. It simply does not exist.
So how do we call you?
There are people who identify themselves as Russian oppositionists, but it's not. There is no organized crowd. The only thing which is organized are the people at the front and the home front. This is the only thing which is being organized. And we prefer to call it Russian resistance, just to draw the difference. I do not want to criticize my friends who are doing some non-violent things, Godspeed, and, it's better to do something than nothing. But unfortunately, they are doing everything.
So I'm gonna rephrase my question. In that case, what is the armed resistance position, and what is the position of these people who like to call themselves opposition?
No, for those people, ask them, because I don't think that there is just one position that is shared among everybody. For us, the situation is very clear because it was official statements and official papers that were adopted. So all the occupied territories, they need to be liberated. All these proxy regimes, which were created illegally on the territories of other countries, should be dismantled. Every nation should have the right for self-determination. It should be a relationship of equals and not of the senior brother and the junior brother. That's as simple as that. And then what we were doing at the Congress, actually, we were analyzing relationships with all the nations alongside the border of Russia and adjacent to the border of Russia, including, by the way, what happened in the past with relationships with Lithuania and with Poland. Obviously, we were trying to highlight all the problem issues and express our position how we see them.
So in other ways, only the armed resistance has this approach that everything has to be done according to the law and international law. and getting back the territories to the countries is not some kind of condition, because we have heard, some people in Russia talking about, that, Crimea, for example, was given, and all sorts of speculations. You don't want to, rethink historical, decisions, reevaluate them. Just to clarify on this.
Look, I think that in politics, you shouldn't trust words. Firstly, you should trust deeds, and then you have to put everything on paper. The thing with this so-called Russian opposition is that nothing is put on paper. There are a lot of bright individuals which like to say something in their YouTube blogs or in their Telegram channels. And one day they say one thing, another day they say another thing. And you can never guess, what they think at this very moment. To be able to say that this position is this and that, it has to be a certain body which would pass a certain paper where it would be written and then signatures under the statement. Then you can at least say, okay, for that moment, the position was this. I never saw such papers. The only people who are drafting those papers is Congress of People's Deputies, which codifies them and say, so that's our position, and that has the power of the law, that we take this and that approach. We are starting to get on more broader papers, as many signatures as possible from others, but because there are so many diverse opinions that we have to make that very limited in size. But in terms of what we do in the Congress of People's Deputies, which is the political arm of the armed resistance, that's where you can read everything to a minor detail. What's the position?
Okay, we got that. So the last question, because I see that we are approaching the time that we have agreed, is obviously everyone who travels in Europe sees a lot of, at least encounters some Russian people who have escaped, mobilization or, before the war, or and sometimes you see them, talking about, Putin, some favorable, approaches. What do you think? This diaspora of Russians that is currently living, let's say, in Europe, what are these people like? What are their position? Do they think more like imperialists? Do they think more like democrats? How to work with them? Because it's quite interesting. They spend some of them spend time in Europe, and some say that in time you understand things. And obviously, there are questions about this. So, how do you see this diaspora, and what role can they play, in the change of the regime and everything?
Diaspora is very fragmented. Mm-hmm. The role in changing the regime is anyway minimal. But the good news is that the role in supporting the regime is also minimal, because they are not in Russia. The only way to play a real role in this is to support those who are fighting inside Russia, at the front lines and at the home front. That's the only way how we can influence.
Are you receiving, support, money from them? Like, how is it tangible to talk about that?
Very limited, unfortunately. We right now are thinking a lot how to overcome this. We have this debate because some of our, opposition leaders, they say, let everybody leave Russia. My position is the obvious. I think that we should stimulate people to stay in Russia rather than leave Russia, because who would be fighting if everybody is left? You may not take the active fighting position at this very moment. You may wait for the favorable moment.
But maybe people are afraid to get mobilized, and be sent to war, so to front line. So how to balance this?
No, the balance is pretty simple, because if you look at not just, philosophical statements, but at the details, you would see that the mobilization in Moscow is virtually non-existent. And in general, in large cities, the mobilization is very small. It happens primarily in the small towns and cities. But the diaspora people are not from the small towns and cities. They are from Moscow and St. Petersburg, primarily. Mm-hmm. And that's people who are escaping their fears and not the immediate danger. I'm totally for helping people who got into real danger. Because, you have done something. You created some partisan activity, and then FSB is trailing you. Obviously, we need to take this person out and give him asylum and protection and whatever. Some people, they are not with arms. Some people with blogs, they created a blog, they started telling the truth, and then they got identified again by the security forces. We need to help them out. And we are helping such people out. But when the person has done nothing, he just is afraid of something that may happen and may not happen. And then he says, I would just go. And then he's again afraid of doing, even donating to Ukrainian army or to Russian volunteer groups, because, I have relatives in Russia and they can be punished. And as the result, he is getting on the necks of the Western taxpayers without taking any part of the resistance struggle. Then, why it should happen? I think it should not. So for me, and again, that's what we discussed at the Congress, it's a very simple criteria. Your ticket to escape is participation in the actual resistance. You took part in it. You may need to leave, but right now we have thousands and thousands of people who are in Russia who are not leaving, because if they are participating in the actual resistance, they are thinking about their security. They are not doing such stupid things as going to the embassies, and leaving their personal details there for FSB to enjoy, that they don't need to spend time on identifying all the opposition-minded people, because they surrendered their data themselves.
Okay, I said the last question, but since I was listening, I have a follow-up. So, there is also this position that Russians like to rebel peacefully. They don't take, actions. They don't confront.
We saw this in 1917, yes.
But that was a long time ago. So you think that there's no such issue? Because we know that, for example, when French, they go out to rebel, well, you can see that there is a rebellion, But let's take an example, Belarusians, they were taking off, shoes and standing, or without shoes, so now nobody can complain. So there is some kind of different mentalities in how to deal with the government. What do you think is the situation with the Russian, possible resistant, people who live in Russia right now? How would they join if something starts like?
No, look, indeed, different nations, they have different traditions. Like you named French, who are ready every month to go and burn some, cars or cafes, and then just, go peacefully home, and feel accomplished. Ukrainians, every 10 years, they have a tradition of going to Maidan, which would be something more serious. But again, after it happens, nobody is punished, and the same elites, continue to prevail in the country. Just a little bit of reshuffle, but the same faces. In Russia, the situation is different. We have this saying that Russians are very slow to start, but very fast to write. And for many people, unfortunately, for some people, fortunately, for me, it's just, the matter of life. I can tell you that the changes in Russia would be like in 1917 in terms of their nature. When Russians would be on the streets, it would be blood, there would be fires, arsons, there would be deaths of those people who are right now part of the elites, and everybody understands this. And that's why it's so slow to start. But it would be very violent, and it would be very, very much large scale. It would fundamentally shake the origins of the society and the statehood of Russia. And there is nothing that we can do about this. It's a nature of people, it's a mentality, and it's a historical process. It has just to be triggered when people would see, okay, the time has come. Again, in 1917, it was exactly like this, because what was February Revolution? It was not gradually building up process. It was triggered by some minor idiotic things.
Okay, so a lot of optimism. I guess, we can just finish on this.
It's not very optimistic. It's not very optimistic. Again, I want you to understand me correctly. I'm not calling for this bloodshed and everything, but I'm calling us to be prepared, because we need to understand the nature of historical processes, and we need to come prepared, and we need to think what would be after. Because if we want then another Soviet Union to be created there, which could be even worse than that Putin's regime, then we can sit down and do nothing. Or we can act.
Well, obviously, not everyone is sitting down, so we're happy about that. In terms of what Europeans and Americans think, I think they are too afraid for the changes in Russia, and the status quo is probably easier for them to understand and to contemplate.
Right, and they are not just doing nothing, they are preventing us from doing many things.
Yes, so it's a problem, and
it's not that we listen to them so much, but still.
Yeah, well, that would be another topic, how to encourage the Westerners to actually stop believing in some myths, comparing current Russia to Soviet Union, and but that would take at least 1 hour again. So maybe next time we're gonna talk about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks everyone for watching. Dėkui visiems ir ką, iki kitų kartų.